tell you how many people they think more partners equals more revenue. That is completely the opposite of the truth. Fewer strategic partners equals more revenue. Everybody else should be on your platform if you're a platform company, orchestrated in your platform ecosystem. When it comes truly to partnering, it should be a very short list.
We believe this time is like no other. We refer to these as the tectonic shifts.
All the hyperscalers in the world, if you add them all together, managed services will be 1.5 times larger.
Because it is the customer buying behavior that has created the need for all of us to rethink our models.
Until we have data quality, the effectiveness of AI cannot be realized, and effectiveness of the partnerships cannot be realized.
Can you figure out first what your purpose is and how Microsoft can support your purpose and how you can support Microsoft purpose? Now we have a partnership. It's the ultimate partnership.
Welcome to, or welcome back to the Ultimate Guide to Partnering. I'm Vince Menzione, your host, and my mission is to help leaders like you achieve your greatest results through successful partnering. On February 20th of 2025, a small group of industry leaders converged here in Boca Raton, Florida, in this very studio, for Ultimate Partners Winter Retreat. What followed was an incredible discourse on the tectonic shifts and the rapid change we're all seeing as partners. I'm joined on stage for a panel discussion with Jay McBain, Principal Analyst at Panelists, Janet Schijns, the CEO of JSG Group, and Greg Sarafin, Vice Chairman Emeritus at EY. If you weren't able to join us in person or on the live stream, we're bringing this incredible session to you here. This is my gift to you. All I ask in return is that you tell your friends, subscribe, consider joining the Ultimate Partner community, and hopefully joining us in the future at an Ultimate Partner event. I hope these sessions provide you the learnings you need to continue to achieve your greatest results. And now, here to this amazing session.
I would say, so I just want to frame the conversation here. Janet sits on a couple of boards. I've asked her to join the conversation because we want to learn not only what partners need to think and do differently, but what organizations all up need to think and do differently. Greg has led the largest, I would say one of the largest ecosystems in the industry at EY, taking it from under $1 billion to 11, 12, maybe even more $1 billion a year in annualized revenue with a really true partnership strategy. So we want to get their perspective here in the conversation. I'm going to start with a little bit of a softball. I want to go back to these tectonic shifts. Jay just shared a whole bunch of new information with us. Anything that was most striking from that conversation with Jay just now?
I think that,
yeah.
Let's see.
Yep, you're on.
Everybody awake now? Okay, good. I think that the big thing that struck me in the conversation is how few senior leaders are elevating partnership to the board and the senior level. Yeah. I see instances of it. I'm on some of those boards, but then I see a lot of instances not of it, where the channel or partner community and leader is being shoved down in the organization rather than risen up. And I think this is the biggest risk to that Fortune 500 list. You want to know who's going to be off that Fortune 500 list in 20 years? The people who didn't get to that elevated to their C-suite. And truly, if you're not a company whose CPO is in line to be your next CEO, you're going to be off that list.
I'm actually going to hit on the AI point since my 88-year-old father asked me about AI every time I talk to him. To your earlier question. I'm laughing. Like, okay, I talked to Pops this weekend. Here's what I will say about AI. I do not believe we're over-indexing on AI. In fact, I believe many SaaS companies are under-indexing on it. I believe SaaS as a species will cease to exist in 5 years unless it makes a pivot to autonomous SaaS. Right, so building the agentic layer. If you talk to Christian Klein about his strategy at SAP, you saw the BDC announcement last week with the partnership with Databricks. It is fundamental to SAP and every SaaS vendor on the planet, large and small, that they get you to build the autonomous layer in their platform. Otherwise, you're going to build it in Microsoft or a hyperscaler or NVIDIA, and then they're going to become a database in the future because the value capture will be in the agentic layer, not in the legacy system of record SaaS platform. So that to me is, if I'm a SaaS company, That is the thing I'm thinking about. What is the autonomous version of me? And then ultimately, what is the services on software version of me, which is the ultimate realization of what I call the convergence between the SaaS market and the professional services market. I could wax poetic about what's happening in professional services, but I'll spare you all that one.
Well, we'll go there. But I want to clarify on that, because I do think that's an interesting point, because today we feed the data into the CRM or ERP system, right? Very manual process. And then we act on the data, or we ask the system to tell us what to do. So how does the agentic AI
So the
that?
entire SaaS industry exists to allow really inefficient humans to do things reasonably efficiently in very large multi-human business processes. And how does it do that? It creates these little tasks and turns all humans into task rabbits. Right? If you have the misfortune of most of your days spent on a SaaS platform, you've had that experience. Right? So here's the problem for the humans in that equation.
Yeah.
Task rabbits can easily be replaced by agents.
Yes.
That is the truth. And they don't have to be particularly smart agents. They're really an agent based on an R3 at this point, or a Gemini 2.0 is probably sufficient. It's the equivalent of maybe a college grad to be able to do those types of task rabbit things. Where it's really going to get interesting is in 3 to 5 years, as that agentic layer gets smarter and smarter, and now all of a sudden the intelligence about the finance function, tax function, whatever it is, ends up in that layer, and the old legacy SaaS database and all of the configuration files and all of the hard-coded workflows and everything else, that's meaningless. Right? All that really matters is there's a place to persist the data so it can be audited and validated and so forth, right? So it's going to change tremendously. It's going to start by replacing the humans that are acting as task rabbits in the SaaS platforms, and it will ultimately be the margin capture in AI will land in 2 places. It will land at the agentic layer, and it will also land at the basis that it'll land in what we call the hyperscalers today. NVIDIA will join them. I think XAI will probably join them. Maybe Oracle will. And you're going to have these platforms where from the data center floor, silicon all the way up to the top layers of the stack, completely owned by these major players, and you're going to run your workloads on those stacks. Right? So it's a very dystopian world.
Yeah.
It's going to feel like we have 5 different purveyors of IBM mainframes. But that's the world that we are betting on in terms of how we think about how our business is going to evolve.
So SaaS will go away in 5 years.
I'll say that, that the public fight in the last couple of weeks between Mark Benioff and Satya at Microsoft has been about this.
Yeah.
Software kind of ate the world, and then AI eats software. It's not that it eats the software, it's eating the model. The idea when you don't have as many tasks people out there is you don't have to buy as many subscriptions. And when Salesforce starts charging you $2 per outcome or per conversation in Agentforce, that's a different model. But if you're already spending $150 for the subscription, and then you start looking at your bill and you're getting the $2 hits, at some point, Wall Street, you'd love to say Wall Street, we're going to charge people $300 per person.
Yeah.
And it's just not going to happen. The subscription prices are going to start to come down to the people that could actually go in and create reports and do analytics, and do intelligence. But that's 10% of people that might ever need to go in and log in. That's the head of the model, the UI, UX on top. What Greg is talking about, and it's absolutely true, is that 90% of people are not going to need that head. Because your Copilot or your Agentforce or whatever agentic AI piece is not going to come log in and pretend to be you. It's going in the back door. There's the data, but it's not going to know what to do with the data. With 250,000 pieces of SaaS out there, there's no way that these big models are going to understand how the data is structured and how they could use it. Yeah. So the workflows that you build on top of the data layer, if you own a channel software tech, stack company, you're going to, this data and this data and this data, we connected, and this is the value. And boy, is that valuable to the salesperson, the marketing person, the CX person, the product person. And that's the Copilot's going to talk to a Copilot. And behind the scenes, be able to bring that value at the right time.
So I'll really blow your minds. Imagine a world where you as a manager have 10,000 agents on your workforce, and then you have a digital twin of you, call it a Copilot if you want, but it's really a digital twin that is the interface between you and those 10,000 agents, because you as a human being cannot manage 10,000 agents, but your digital twin can. Your digital twin can then talk to you at human speed, which is a fraction of the speed of talking to those agents, where you need to make a decision or you need to be aware of something, right? So this is a business architecture that's quite interesting, and we can talk about this at the bar tonight, perhaps, because I don't think you want to take the conversation this
I think
direction.
you're right.
But anyway.
I probably don't want to go there. I would just add one thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think if you talk about where your C-suite and your board is having the conversations, they were promised something by the industry. They were promised by Microsoft and others a 30% reduction in staff. That's what they were promised as the outcome of AI. So as we talk about agents and we talk about digital twins and we talk about everything else, there's a check that was written for technology that the C-suite and the board are not yet seeing a payout for. Towards that, hey, we get there, we buy all this meta stuff, and then nothing happens. Buy all this AI stuff, right? What's going to happen next? This is where the people come in. The people are resisting the change at certain levels, particularly in the partner ecosystem. As an example, if you have 375,000 partners, why isn't the first place you look for a digital twin your channel leader?
Yeah.
Your channel leader can't possibly scale, right? But that's not the conversation they're having. They're having conversations about, hey, I bet you we could cut 30% of accounting. So that's, again, where you need to change that conversation at the C-level in the company to make sure that you're doing the right thing that's going to magnify growth rather than just cost savings with AI. And I think that's where the break is right now.
So how do we solve for the break?
Well, I was in the channel. I would put together a group of people, think of class action lawsuits, but we're not going to sue. I would put together a group of partners and get them a way to communicate to your board and your C-suite. Their voices are being masked. Their voices are being shut down. They're being treated like transactional partners, and they're not. And so all of the C-suite and the board is relying on a group of people that don't know anything about partnering as they make these large decisions. And so they're bringing in experts that sell the technology, but those experts that sell the technology are telling them things that won't even work for the actual go-to-market model we have in our own environment. And so if you're a channel leader listening, if you're a partner listening, start reaching out to the board. Start making your decisions about who you partner with by who they have on their board. I look at the boards of some of these companies. They have no one that even understands sales or marketing, much less the channel. They're hiring channel leaders, partners, CPOs that have no partnering experience because they went to college with them and they're friends with them. You need to have the discussion. You need to take a Michelle McBain, and I'm looking at her right here in the front row, who's an amazing channel person, and have her voice heard. Have my voice heard. Have Jay's voice heard, right? Have all of Vince's voice heard. Get the voices heard by the C-suite and the entire board, or honestly, I think they're going to go in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And it's going to be very damaging. And again, I'll repeat myself from earlier. Those are going to be the companies that fall off the Fortune 5,000, much less the 500.
I do think there's a skills gap. And I'll
skills
look
gap.
at the end there, Greg, as an example of somebody who brought financial chops into the board, right? And I think that one of the challenges, we've all talked about this conversation, that the path to chief partner officer today looks like somebody who was a channel leader, who became a channel chief, who just took on the title of chief partner officer, maybe has some cred at the C-suite, and maybe doesn't.
Right.
And that I think that's one of the biggest challenges.
That nice titling change, and we'll make you believe that you're important, and even though we do 80% of our sales through you, you're not really important. And that's the conversation. You need to push that conversation. If you're a partner listening to this, you need to push that with your top vendors, suppliers, ISVs, and if you're a ISV vendor supplier, you got to push that with your C-suite, push that with your board. You're not listening. You're not, and you're running past your partnering, and it's gonna really damage these firms that don't really adapt. Because AI is great, but only if you apply it to the right place, which is your predominant go-to-market, your channel.
I know Jay and I had this conversation, maybe it's 2 years ago now, right, about the new skill set. Do you think we're seeing the new skill set apply generally? Because I don't know if I agree we have.
Well, I agree with Janet, and I spent a lot of time, again, boards.
Yeah.
And, looking, and they're very impressive people. Getting called into these big reseller boards, there's the head of United Healthcare, there's the head of Boeing. I mean, these are people with ridiculous resumes and really rich and famous and everything else. And I'm looking around the room going, That's different. I go back to Janet's original concept, and this isn't just the technology industry. These are all 27 industries grappling with this.
Yeah.
One of the things that jumped out to me like 2 years ago when Apple was doing an iPhone launch, like later in the broadcast, Tim Cook kind of stood up and said, do you know that 79% of people today will not buy a car unless it has Apple CarPlay? I'm sure he meant to say Android Auto as well. But imagine, just switch gears, and you're in this $3 trillion auto industry, 63 brands, 365 cars, but it's a 120-year-old industry. You're just taking over a dealership from your great-great-grandparents or passing it down. And because of a tech integration you're missing, you're about to lose 4/5 of your buyers. So this isn't just SaaS companies. This isn't just marketplaces. This isn't the rich getting richer. This is every industry, to Greg's point, has to lose kind of this UI, UX on top. And I want my co-pilots talking to my pharmaceutical company, my pharmacy. I want them talking to my all the industries I work in or live in every day. And that's part of every board. And I'll say that there's a 90% miss in terms of people that will be able to enunciate that and bring it up as a topic of critical importance. Tectonic shift, inflection point is the best and quickest way, into a board or into a C-suite. And right now is absolutely the time.
Yeah.
I would say I know board seats are at there's not a lot of board seats available. A board advisor, just get to the point. You saw Jay's slide had 117 consultants in it. There you go. 117 people plus the top channel chiefs that could be an advisor to your boards. And I think the skill gap is just widening, and it's concerning.
And why isn't it happening?
I think it's because we continue to conflate small P partnering with big P partnering.
Yeah.
So small P partnering is partnering equals go-to-market equals channel equals effectively indirect selling, right? We forget that not every company is a platform company, but if you're a platform company, you will not be a success. And by the way, platform, I'm not just talking about, my favorite platform company is Ryobi. Go to Home Depot. Bloody thing is a huge platform. It's a battery platform with an amazing assortment of tools, and I'm a tool geek, right? Tesla is a platform, right? So, generally in this world, you've got platform business models and vertically integrated business models. That's probably another simplification. But if you're running a platform business, partnering is not just about channel. It's also about co-innovation. It's about co-investment, and it's about extending your platform through an ecosystem of partners and then being an outstanding orchestrator of that ecosystem, right? Which to me is really the center of gravity for partnering, because that also then connects you back to the other side of partnering, which everybody forgets about, which is OEM partnering, right? I drive my car, I've got my Apple CarPlay, but I've got my Recaro seats, I've got my Brembo brakes, right? This is not a new concept, folks, right? But we've made partnering small P, and I've been in many organizations where they have multiple partnering functions, not talking to each other, not realizing they're all to be connected to maximize the flow of value through that value chain. And also reducing the number of partners they have, because I can tell you how many people they think more partners equals more revenue. That is completely the opposite of the truth. Fewer strategic partners equals more revenue. Everybody else should be on your platform if you're a platform company, orchestrated in your platform ecosystem. When it comes truly to partnering, it should be a very short list. So to me, that's the issue we have, and we're not explaining that to boards.
Yeah.
And we also, frankly, don't have, like a CPO, if I said, okay, what is the role of a CPO and what is the career path to CPO, and I asked 10 smart people, I would get 10 completely different answers, guaranteed, maybe 11, because one would change their mind. Interesting, right? If I ask 10 people, those same people, what's the role of a CFO, I get very similar answers, both in terms of the role and the career path.
You know what that says to me? We don't really have CPOs.
We don't have CPOs.
Right, the CPO isn't actually a member of the C-suite. It's a glory title we gave because we thought it might raise our throughput production in the little P by 10 or 15% to have a CPO. Ooh, maybe they can sell a little bit more next year. And I have to tell you, if you're working with or working for a company, if that's how they're talking about the channel, I like that little P. I usually call it transactionally. If that's how they're talking about the channel, you should run because your career is at risk. If the channel is about just distribution, your career is at risk. That company's going nowhere. It really should be integrated into the fabric of your company, where I would say back in the day, there was a quote from the head of Kellogg, and he said, you could take everything we have and leave me the brand, and I will survive. And I would say now you can take everything I have and leave me the real partners, and I will survive. And that's the mindset that they need to get at the top of these companies.
Yeah, which they
Yeah.
don't.
Speaking of channel,
Good.
just one last point on channel. Channel is kind of like super sweet sugar cereal, right? It tastes really good, and it has no nutrition. In fact, it's making you sick. Okay? For the most part. Everybody needs a little cereal now and then, don't get me wrong.
Sunday morning.
There are two issues with over-indexing on channel in your enterprise. The first is you lose fidelity on your revenue forecast, and if you're a public company in particular, but even if you have LPs and GPs that really care about your business performance on a quarterly basis, not being able to forecast your revenue because too much of your revenue is unforecastable is a really bad idea. Second thing is, particularly if you're in an industry like tech where it's actually not the first sale that matters, it's the renewal that matters. Selling through the channel typically has a much lower renewal rate than selling direct with customer success, right? So your channel feels good because you're moving some of your cost of sales, you're making it invisible as cost of revenue, as effectively a discount. It's only 2 or 3 points of discount, but then you add a bunch of cost of sales on top of it because now you've got a whole team that's trying to divine with those wooden sticks what the actual revenue forecast is going to be from each of your channel partners, right? And we're heading to a world where the productivity of direct sellers is about the 10x, right? Because autonomous CRM, what is it going to do? Is going to eliminate all of that layer of sales enablement of people that suck at their jobs and can't enable pretty much anybody and are a huge drag on expense ratio, expensive cost of sales or SG&A to revenue. And it is going to now create sellers that actually you can expect to have 10 times the quota that they had yesterday, right, in 3 years, let's say. So you actually need to be thinking about channel as don't eat too many of those Cocoa Puffs, particularly given that you're about to see a step change in the productivity of your direct sellers in terms of their ability to address the market for you. And I'll stop.
I just,
I'm gonna jump in.
I thought that might get a rise. I thought that might get a rise.
It's provocative.
So I'm going to disagree with the,
I thought you
almost
would.
everything you said.
Excellent.
I love it. I love it.
A company doesn't have the luxury to determine how their customers buy. Your category or your industry dictates to you. I mentioned cybersecurity. If you went with your advice and ignored the 91.6% of customers who bought through channels, you'd be competing in 8% of your TAM. If you sell PCs, 70% are bought through Larry and the White Van. If you decide that Larry and the White Van is not good for you, you're competing with Dell for the 30% direct. Market by market, there's 2,200 categories on G2 Crowd of categories that are all predetermined by your buyer and procurement and how it works. So your channels, you want to participate in 100% of your TAM, if you can, and you want to participate in all the ways that money changes hands, whether it be indirect, marketplace, or direct, and that's one muscle. That's small p, partnering. That's the part I agree with. The bigger P, partnering, is I'd love to partner with the other 6 people who are doing the co-selling, co-marketing, who are doing the consulting design, who are doing the implementation, integration, who are lowering our cost to acquire the customer, who are building bigger deals and closing them faster, and who get us a customer for life. If I can take those 6 and equate them back to my revenue targets, which is what boards and CEOs and CFOs care about, and do that in a repeatable, reliable way, that is the big P partnering. And by the way, every company has to do both.
So hey, so I don't know if you guys think I should sit between them or like, give me a vote, and seating move needed. So here you go, I'm gonna do the thing. I'm gonna reconcile the 2 views, right? I think they're both right.
Yes.
So on the one level, we are seeing a sea change in reliability and how partners, because many of the partners are not commercializing the offer, it's very hard to figure out, particularly in the enterprise and large multinational space, when the deal's coming in if you're not working it. That's why folks like I'm looking right here at Partner Tap at Cassandra, that's why they're having so much success, because that integrated selling model is how people are really understanding how they're going to get a massive opportunity from enterprise by doing it with direct and indirect, as the old school thing would say. But then to Jay's point, if you don't do that, if you don't partner with partners, you start to have conversations that sound a lot like funnel reviews at the C-suite, which means, again, run from the company because they don't understand partnering. Because partnering is about integrating it through the fabric of your product development, of your enablement, of your sales, of your innovation, of your compliance, of your governance, throughout the organization. Because it's 90% in security, it ought to be a core element of your operating model. And if you have flowcharts in your company, I always challenge people with this, and those flowcharts don't show where the partner spot is in every single area, then you are not in partnering. You're in,
Channel.
to my friend's point here, channels.
They're eating Cocoa Puffs.
You're eating Cocoa Puffs, and you're going to be disappointed every quarter because unless you have a small business kind of package that, you get your volume and that kind of evens out your forecast, you'll be disappointed every quarter because you're never going to be able to know what's coming in. So they're both right, and they're friends, and they're going to hug later.
Remember sugary cereals were always part of a nutritious breakfast? You had to have the
Lucky
orange,
charm.
apple, and the juice, and
Lucky charm.
all the other stuff that made it part of a nutritious breakfast.
Correct. You had the juice. Yeah.
Well, I also think that ignoring the business model in this conversation, where Greg is at the very top of the pyramid, right? Mostly large enterprise, maybe some mid-market. And I'm not ignoring the other parts, because you're right on the channel versus partnering piece, absolutely. But also, as you get higher up in the stack and you have the luxury, I would say, of resources attached to each of those customers that are driving the executive level conversations, it's different than a channel that may just come in and accelerate or juice your revenue for a period of time, right?
Yeah, and I do tend to bias big, right, in my thinking.
Right.
Because I've been a big company for a long time, and my statements are not meant to address every market segment. And I do agree with Jay, actually, that there are certain companies in certain market segments who in today's market must address the market through channel. They have no choice. I'm also suggesting that the way the world works today and the way the world's going to work in 5 years may be very different. And so I'm front-running that a little bit. And there's no way to know if I'm right or wrong. I'm just telling you the bet we're making.
That makes sense.
Let's dive in on that, because I do, you touched on AI and agentic, and I'd love to see how we talk about this, like for the hyperscalers in the room. How are we thinking about partner development managers? How are we thinking about partnering in general? We have we're still using Excel spreadsheets, for crying out loud, and we're doing funnel reviews, and we're having conversations with account executives that are going nowhere because they're overwhelmed with what they have to go drive with partners, with a group of partners. Again, for every one of their customers, they have to talk to at least 7 seats. They have to have all these conversations. They can't really navigate it. How does AI help us improve that? Like, how do we get better at that through AI?
I'll tell you a perspective that we have right now. We believe that we and a lot of our large clients, but I would extend that to any customer, honestly, need to get serious about taking the people cost out of revenue production. Revenue production either needs to be through marketplaces and other automated mechanisms of commerce, or it needs to be highly productive sellers, either in your direct sales force or in some channel partner's direct sales force. Right? The cost of sales enablement at most companies, including mine, is outrageously high when you then index it to the benefit you're getting. Right? I can tell you that I run an awesome team of partner development and partner operations people, most of whom I've moved offshore over the years, and then put ServiceNow and other technologies underneath of them to automate all their, I've made them task rabbits, I suppose, to my earlier point, because there was no off-the-shelf software. We had to build all our own to satisfy the needs of our business. That has been reasonably successful, but at any given time, I can only address the needs of maybe 3% of my total sales force across the 160 countries that we operate in, and it is not sufficient. It is too expensive for the benefit we're getting, and it's not scalable. I need something I can scale at zero marginal cost to cover 100% of every selling opportunity at any given time, whether it is a partnering selling opportunity and or a selling opportunity where I need to have a deep understanding of a solution that we've developed, maybe with a partner, maybe not, right? So to me, the answer is all of SG&A that is not direct revenue production needs to move to agentic capabilities to enable all of sellers and our average bag tellers that should have ultimately have 10x the quota they have today, if we do it right. That is our view, and that is our bet on the future of selling.
And we're seeing the same thing in partners, right? The larger partners across the, whether an SI, an MSP, a iron worker VAR, right? They're starting to look at AI and where it can eliminate friction in the system more than where it can eliminate headcount. So instead, I want to repurpose that headcount to build the next great product, to sell the next great product, to go 10x, our revenue. The issue is that everybody's doing their little piece products. It's kind of like when we started putting things in the cloud. Every single department in a company bought an extra large cloud. They didn't really need it, but they bought it, and they all swiped credit cards, and usage rates were going crazy, and all of a sudden, at one point in time, the CFO was like, what is happening? Why are our IT expenses so high? And then they consolidated back into centralized IT again, right? We're gonna manage all the cloud. We're seeing the same thing starting to happen now with the AI journey across in the partner community, particularly, where a lot of pet projects have happened, and they're not really what's important. And I'm going to use a specific example that's on that chart you shared. The telecom industry. I was the chief channel officer at Verizon. There's a massive expense to run pipe. If you actually want an enterprise to have all this great stuff we're talking about, AI, cloud, servers, the whole nine yards to actually work, it actually has to connect. And so that has been really left behind to a certain extent because the cost is so high. It could cost you $5 million to put a vertical riser in a corporate building, right? And so what's happened? Innovators have come around, like Broadband GPT, who have said, you know what? We can do all the build function up until the person puts the pick in the ground, right, to dig, the permits, the sizing, the everything, with AI. And that's going to not eliminate hundreds of installers and hundreds of engineers. It's going to mean that rather than waiting 9.5 months on average for an enterprise network, you're going to get an enterprise network in a month. Think about what this does for your level of innovation. So it's not just the snazzy, pretty hyperscalers and ISVs that are going to use AI. It's the toasters, right? The plumbing, and it's going to get faster and faster. And that pace of speed is what we're all going to be measured on. Are we as fast as AI?
Let me do a real life channel example in agentic AI. So in the 28 measurable moments that a customer moves through from I have a problem to making the purchase, and how to measure those. In today's world, we live as the products on the internet. So the world of buying buyer intent data, those early moments, what did they search for? 81% of customers start on Google or now, ChatGPT. Where did they move from there? What did they find on Google? Well, they found an ebook. They found a podcast. So it's those early moments. Both Google and Facebook have created $6 trillion of value on us being the products on the internet. When you speak in your kitchen, Alexa overhears you and Facebook serves you up an ad 2 minutes later. That's $6 trillion of value on the stock market.
Yeah.
So we kind of all went to elections last year, 45% of the world, and 90% of the incumbents lost. And we kind of told our elected representatives, we're done with that. So the end of the cookie is creating the biggest change in those 28 moments ever, another tectonic shift.
Right.
So Google goes and creates version 2 of the cookie, goes to sell it to the European Union, which are the toughest people to sell to, and failed. A week later, they lost an antitrust suit in the U.S. So this was kind of the final moment. So when you start to look at those 28 moments, especially early, you start to say, well, how am I going to get to them? Who owns the moment, and how do I partner with them? So you use PartnerTap as a perfect example, which is perfect agent. Not only looking at the 2 CRM systems for SQLs, but looking at the marketing automation systems for MQLs.
Right.
But if I could go and have an agent say, hey, they found your ebook, they listened to your podcast, they come to my website, and they actually came to my event. Just between the two of us, we found 4 of the first 10 moments.
Yep.
Boy, would it be a great time, either digitally or physically, ushering the customer through the next 18 moments to make sure that we both win.
Yep.
And in this new world, it's not just PartnerTap now. I have to have an attribution tool. I have to have my through channel marketing tool. I have to have my deal registration tool, my opportunity passing, my lead passing. So here's like 5 or 6 things that I can't go log into all 6 and go figure out for a particular deal all the stuff that's happening. But boy, could my co-pilot or my agent go and tap into all these places.
Like in
and create a
cohorts and,
perfect, scenario. Oh my goodness, I've now seen 14 of the first 28 moments. I know exactly the customer, who they are. I know exactly what they want. And I actually know the 7 layers of the stack and the 7 people that would be perfect for this. Let me orchestrate the 14 things going on, and let's go win more deals. But I can't do it without these layers. And I just, in the headless world, I got to have this data and be able to execute, within milliseconds.
I'll also use a real example. I'll use us. We're working right now with several of our largest partners and a third party, none of whom I'll name, at the innocent. But so here's the thing we're solving for. In order to replace partner development and make it scalable, to make partner development scalable, we need to be able to scale it with AI, not with people. It's not scalable with people alone. Now, I could build a bunch of AI on my side, but in order for that AI to really work, it also has to be able to then do work in my partner's systems of record as well. Well, guess what? My partners love me, but not that much. They're not going to let me go traipsing around in their patch, right? And by the way, I have the same view of them. So what we've determined is we actually need to work with a trusted third party to sit between us, to build the agents to our specification.
That's right.
And those agents can work both sides of the street, literally. So they understand all my business rules and all of my constraints and how to access my systems of record, including my CRM, et cetera. And then they also understand the same thing about the other sides, and they also understand the translation layer. And they also know how to enable my sellers and their sellers to work together, even though they've never done that before, right? So that is really where we're hyper-focused right now, is how do you create that sort of agent force, use Benioff's term, that works both sides of the organization, but protecting my data from them and their data from me, in order to accomplish and then really take the cost out and make it infinitely scalable to do partner enablement.
I love that. If that sounds too heady, if you're listening here in the audience or on, you're like, that seems like a lot. Okay, but it seems like a lot to do, right? The simple thing I've encouraged people to do is go out and look at the 7 or 8 big partners that you have in your stack, right? Maybe your checkpoint for security. Who else is in your stack that a partner would sell? And I know the guys from Unify are here. They've built a cool platform, as has PartnerTap, to let you actually integrate with those other parties,
Third party.
right? And maybe you start there, right? Maybe you start at the very practical, like, hey, if a partner just didn't have to, from a go-to-market transactional standpoint, register a lead in 9 platforms, maybe that would get us more business. And maybe it would, because maybe you're kind of a pain in the neck to deal with. And so those kinds of platforms that are just saying, hey, let's make it one motion for our partners, rip out, to Greg's point, that sales enablement issue where you have to have 10 people just to interface with systems. That's where you're going to see it. And, we see this at AvePoint. Now, look, I'm biased. I'm on the AvePoint board. Dux is here, and he's the best marketer in the world. But AvePoint stood up one day and said, we're going to put a channel expert on board. We're going to go hard at helping the MSPs with their business. It wasn't about the revenue, but the revenue followed, right? When the MSPs saw the dedication, the things that AvePoint was doing to simplify their life, to simplify their business, to help their business make money, the business came with it. Because the bottom line is partners do vote with the quote, right? They're not going to quote you unless you're a good partner. And while we can sit up here and say, hey, it's not going to be about transactions, it still is half about transactions. And so I would say that the better partner you become, and AvePoint has demonstrated this, the more and more business you get, the more your partners grow, the more your partners become the top Microsoft partners, because that's the ecosystem that AvePoint is in. The more the partners start to use you more and more in their business, the better partners they become. The more big companies now want to be your partners and integrate into your stack, right? It really comes down to saying, I'm going to put the revenue over here, as uncomfortable as that sounds. I'm going to put it over here, and first I'm going to be a good partner. And then I'm going to get the revenue.
So I love what you have to say about AvePoint, and Dux is going to be on a session in a little while talking about marketplaces, in fact. So we haven't really touched on marketplaces in this conversation. we have 2 of the 3 are here in the room talking about marketplaces today. So I think it's a really great, like we have $419 billion in durable cloud budgets today, right? Why isn't it moving as fast as I believe it should? I don't feel like it's moving as fast as it should.
Partners are selling against it. That's my final answer.
Okay.
There's a couple layers to the
Yeah.
answer. One is that 82% compounded growth is nothing to scoff at.
Right.
That's almost doubling in size every year.
Yeah.
AWS became a top 10 distributor in less than 2 years. A distribution business that's been around 40 years, it took them 2.
Agree.
And that was top 10. Now we're starting to talk about them as a top 5,
Right.
joining TD SYNNEX, Ingram, who are $60 and $50 billion distributors, bigger than Nike and Coca-Cola, Starbucks, and McDonald's combined. That's the size we're talking about. That's pretty fast. And that's doubling almost every year. When you add the agentic models, it continues to grow even faster than that.
But how much of it is fulfillment on private offers versus net new revenue? That's the question I have.
The thing that doesn't change that quickly, which you know, is procurement.
Yeah.
Procurement in large enterprise, especially procurement in the government. 56% of our industry is enterprise. 44% is SMB, does turn faster,
Right.
but SMBs are not buying cloud consumption. So to go to the procurement divisions in the government is getting doged pretty quickly
Yes.
in terms of how they buy. In other words, they're turning everything
It's a
off
verb now.
Good, I like that.
and getting everything turned on. So we saw yesterday that Gartner just got like $5 billion of business shut off by the federal government.
Yeah.
And nobody looked to see if it was creating value and why and who and where. And all they said is, it's all off now, it's canceled, and now you've got to go reapply for the money. And so it's just a kind of a 50% cost savings, but procurement is in, dog years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why it's happening.
And
What you
procurement,
feel is slower.
and procurement
That's
has the
right.
relationship with who? The partner, right? We've seen this. 70+% of the time they're buying through the partner. The services is leading the sale.
Inertia.
So now when you try to push that to the marketplace and cut the partner out, and I'm sorry, with all the love in my heart to the hyperscalers, you are trying to cut the partner out. You can talk to me about your partner program and what you're trying to do and how you're helping, but it's not true.
50%?
Right, exactly. It's not true. You're not integrating the partner into your marketplace play. So you're forcing the partner to do the only thing they can, which is sell against you. And then the next thing they're going to do is find an alternative. And we can smile and say we're too big to fail, but the hyperscalers are not too big to fail. We have seen big companies in our industry fail before. So the hyperscalers that get it right, that get the partner to understand how it works in their business and how they can use and place orders in the marketplace, use it as part of their thing, lower their costs because they're putting their customers through marketplaces, that's the hyperscaler that wins.
I think we're going to hear some of that later.
I'll just give a slightly different take on marketplace, different perspective, I suppose. So I don't know where marketplaces end, but I can tell you they've already had a massive impact that may not be as visible to many of you. So in our business, we sort of go to market by industry and then by buyer, right? So the head of, insurance operations in the insurance industry. And so it used to be for years that we had a partner ecosystem curated around that buyer with a bunch of different technology products that we pre-integrated together. And that was sort of our easy button offering. Now, if you wanted to piece part it out, that's fine, we would do that for you too, but we always would come with an easy button. What's happened with the marketplace is it has so dramatically changed buying behaviors. We had to actually create 3 versions of that ecosystem, one for the Microsoft stack, one for the Amazon stack, and one for the Google stack, because clients want the drawdown that they get through the marketplace. And so if you go to them with an ecosystem that has something that can only be drawn down in Amazon, and it's a Microsoft, it's a Mac that client has, a massive Mac, and they need to draw down there, that's going to be a losing value proposition. So those marketplaces, from one perspective, are extremely successful from my perspective because they are shaping the winners and losers around each of those stacks. And then that has a washback effect on us because we now have to support 3 different versions of ecosystems for each of the solutions that we bring to market. So that's a different take I'd share with you.
I'll take just 3 reasons why, looking forward, of all the trends coming together. One is the new buyer. 51% of our buyers now love marketplaces.
Yeah.
The second reason is all the models, subscription, consumption, and now micro-consumption. over the next 10 to 20 years favor marketplaces.
Absolutely.
So this is, your buyer trading change. This is the marketplaces. The one thing I haven't talked about, which is a major trend, is the new buyer, which is FinOps. There's a new set of people. There's 24,000 of them now that are 50% trained in tech and 50% trained in finance. And they've been employed now between the CFO and the CIO, originally to kind of move around hyperscaler workloads to save money, then moved out to kind of edge to cloud. Hey, should we run this on that old Dell server because we could do it cheaper? And now they're expanding into this agentic AI, which is the cost to the organization of tech. Every company in the world is outrageous, and the boards and everybody else have a laser focus on it. And now there's somebody that's trained on both sides. And if you go to finops.org and study this model, these people love marketplaces. This commit, the $419 billion of commit, is coming out of FinOps. Because I don't want shadow IT.
Right.
I don't want managers putting things on credit cards, bringing in security risks and other things. I don't want our data going out to public clouds. This is becoming a center where the CFO and the CIO are both gated, and they are reporting up to the board.
Consolidation. I want to open up I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions, and we have a short window of time. But for the studio audience, they're going to get more time with you all later. But questions? I see. Is anybody up at the mic, or anybody have any questions they want to ask? I'll ask you to go to the mic, though, if you can. Erica.
I feel personally attacked by the comments around the 9 different platforms because I work at Microsoft. It is a pain in the butt. Oh, thank you. That was not my question, though. Earlier, Mark and I, we were chatting about some companies are actually, they are drawing a line in the sand when it comes to AI. And they don't want it. And I started to really think about that, and I'm just curious, what your thoughts are. Are those folks just doomed? Are they going to have to pull it together? Or could there be an uprising of people that are like, listen, we have got to make some changes here, not just for compliance and safety reasons, but for human reasons. And I'm just super curious on your thoughts about that.
I guess I can take a stab. Two things to look at is the integration first fire. And if a certain company in my staff, personal or professional life, doesn't want to play, and my co-pilot can't go and do the work I need, and I have to manually go and do things, I'm going to stop buying. Kind of like today, if somebody doesn't take my version of payment, I find a new place to shop.
Yeah.
So that's kind of your customers are going to force the change on the integration first world. And then, one thing I didn't say is 50% of the Fortune 500 fail over 20 years. 71% of tech companies fail that aren't in the Fortune 500 and can't buy their way out of problems. 71% fail within 10 years.
Yeah.
So what creates, change? And if you're not playing in this stack, and if you're not having that agent and data model that you can add value, I can't see a way forward. And that's why this is different than IoT and it's different than other changes. It's just the way we're evolving as a society and the way we're evolving in business.
I do agree, though, that there's going to be not a reckoning, maybe is too tall of a word, back to the Arnold Schwarzenegger. But there is a movement among younger people, Gen Z particularly, back to the basics, back to hands-on, loving bookstores, loving record stores, loving experiences. And I do think that, especially in SMB, if you think about shopping local, there's going to be a huge return to anti-technology, to places you can go and get away from it, where the robots won't be, where there won't be automation, where actual humans talk to you. And I represent this myself. My daughter has a PhD. She was a research analyst in this industry. She's dropped out of this industry and she's opening an independent bookstore. Why? Because that's where the money is for her. Long term, that bot's going to replace her as a research agent. And she sees it, and she talks to her friends, and she knows that's where the money is going to be in the local community. So I think in the local community, you're going to see an anti-AI kind of sentiment in small business.
I'll just do quick take. First, I think co-pilots we're certainly the place to start, but we're never going to be successful because changing the ways people work is super expensive. Nobody wants to spend that money, especially for something that does not have easily quantifiable benefits, which co-piloting does not. We are a use case for that at my firm. The second is that, in general, companies want to have big returns that are measurable, not little returns. And so if they're going to allocate capital, they don't allocate capital, they have capital projects to make big changes to the equation of their value in the market. And so agentic technology, when it is fully mature, I think will be that break point where you're really going to start to see capital allocated in large chunks to then change the way the enterprise operates.
That makes good sense, yeah. I have a question.
We have a question,
I have a
yeah.
question for Greg.
And
So
then
Greg,
I have
you
one
talked
from
about how, with agents, sellers, we're gonna have fewer sellers, they're gonna rise to the top, but, and the channel's basically gonna go away. Totally disagree here, and I'm wondering, with agents and looking at channel account managers, partner account managers, I mean, it's the same thing on this side of the house too. On the partner side, there's so much coming out, so much technology coming out that's going to do the same job on the sales side as the partner side and trim that fat. But these channel relationships, like the seller needs to have those relationships. But I see fewer channel account managers, fewer partner account managers, fewer sellers, but we're using agents to really get the right people to the dance for the relationships.
Yeah, I don't believe channel's going away. My point was, and apparently I didn't make it well. I was
Okay.
trying to be a little provocative here to get him going, but I want to get a rise
Got
up.
it.
Yeah, it is, you got to think about your balance. And you also have to take into account, as this agentic technology makes your direct sellers much more effective, how do you rethink allocating cost of sales that way, where you have much higher likelihood of drawdown and renewals, as well as potentially a better customer experience if you do it well, right? That's my only point. You're still going to have channels, and all this is going to play out. But my point is, start thinking about what is that balance, because the calculus is going to change a bit for a whole lot of reasons, including how channel will evolve. Right? And these mechanisms like marketplace and other things. So the only point I'm really trying to make to you is think carefully about your entire go-to-market calculus and realize that direct, done correctly with this technology, can be a much more powerful way to shape the future of your business revenue flow.
Oh, I just have to say no. I'm so sorry. I really do like you. But yeah, you have thousands of partners who sell 7 to 13 solutions to the customer. You are one solution if you're thinking about your direct team, right? You're one solution. I would really focus first on empowering and automating and streamlining in your partner community, because your direct sales team is much smaller. And then you can apply what you learn in your partner community to your direct team. So I was going to flip that on its head a little bit, because I think the efficiencies are more from your partner community that you can get than from your direct team. And again, some 28-year-old that comes in and swears he owns Bank of America doesn't own Bank of America. The partner probably does. Final,
All right.
final answer.
Fantastic conversation. We could go on for the whole rest of the day, and but I have to keep us somewhat on time.
Let's do it.
So I want to thank each of you. Really provocative conversation, which is what I was hoping for today. So we're going to have some more talk. And then there was a question about marketplaces and AI, and I'm going to ask either Microsoft or Google to answer that question for Jeff Huey, who was in the live stream and asked that question. So thank you so much. Thank you. Wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you for joining this episode of Ultimate Guide to Partnering. And if you haven't done so already, mark your calendars. Ultimate Partner Live Spring is coming to Redmond, Washington on May 1st and 2nd. This is going to be an incredible event. Like each of our Ultimate Partner events, this one is going to be just a little bit better than the one before. We're having incredible leaders from Microsoft, industry leaders talking about co-selling, marketplaces, aligning to Microsoft priorities, and more. You don't want to miss this event. Sign up today before seats run out.